Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're tackling a really big question. Does one-on-one mentorship for at-risk youth actually work? It's an idea that feels right, you know? But we're going to break down decades of research to see what the evidence really has to say.
Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. First, we're going to get a handle on the problem these programs are even trying to solve. Then, we'll look at mentorship as the proposed solution and dig into the hard data. After that, and this is the important part, we'll uncover what makes some programs work so much better than others. And finally, we'll pull it all together with the bottom line.
First up, let's set the stage. To really get why mentorship is even on the table as a solution, we've got to understand the unique hurdles that marginalized kids are up against, day in and day out.
And this quote right here, it really hits the nail on the head. For a lot of kids who are dealing with big stressors like poverty or violence in their community, those few hours right after school can be a really vulnerable time. All that unstructured, unsupervised time, well, it can sometimes become a window for risky behaviors, really just because there aren't a lot of positive alternatives available.
Okay, so you see the problem, right? Well, that's exactly where mentorship programs come into the picture. They're built on an idea that's actually really powerful and, honestly, pretty intuitive.
At its absolute core, mentorship is all about connection. These programs pair a young person with an adult volunteer. And you know, the main goal here isn't about being a tutor or a coach. It's really about building a genuine, caring relationship, someone who can offer support and friendship completely outside of the family.
Okay, so what's the theory here? How does having a mentor actually help? Well, according to a leading model, a great mentoring relationship sparks growth in three major ways. First, it helps with social and emotional skills, just by showing what a positive relationship looks like. Second, it provides something called cognitive scaffolding, which is a fancy way of saying it gives a kid a mental leg up through conversation and new experiences. And third, it helps a young person figure out who they are, just by showing them new possibilities and being a positive role model.
All right, that all sounds great in theory, right? But what about the proof? Does it actually hold up when scientists look at it? Let's turn to the data from some huge studies and see what they tell us.
So back in 2002, a huge study combined the results of 55 different programs. And what they found was, yeah, it works. The effect was positive. The number they landed on was an effect size of 0.18, which basically confirmed that, on average, these programs were making a real beneficial difference.
Now let's jump forward almost 20 years. In 2019, a new, even bigger review looked at 70 different studies. And look at that number, 0.21. I mean, that is incredibly consistent, right? It shows us that this isn't just a fluke. Even with different programs and different researchers, the overall finding is pretty much the same.
And this is what I find so fascinating. It just shows you how solid this finding is. A really recent analysis from 2023 looked at something similar, after-school programs, and their result? Almost identical. When you see this kind of consistency across hundreds of studies and decades of research, you know you're onto something real.
So you keep hearing this phrase, small but significant. But what does that actually mean for a kid? Well, it means that the average kid in a mentoring program does better than about 57% of kids who weren't in one. So, no, it's not some magic wand that transforms every kid overnight, but it is a real, meaningful, positive push in the right direction.
And this positive effect, it isn't just one single thing. When the researchers break it down, they find these little boosts pretty much across the board in social skills and how kids do at school, and even in their psychological well-being, like self-esteem. The benefit is really broad.
Okay, so this leads to a super important question. If the average effect is small, that has to mean some programs are doing way better than average, and, well, some probably aren't doing much at all. So what's the secret sauce?
What's the difference maker? What separates the programs that really change a kid's life from the ones that, fall flat? Well, the research actually gives us some surprisingly clear answers.
And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of the matter. It turns out just showing up isn't the magic ticket. A study found that simply being enrolled in a program wasn't enough to make a real dent in things like hope or self-esteem. The thing that actually predicted good outcomes was the quality of that one-on-one relationship. That connection, that was the key ingredient.
And here's the good news. You can actually design programs to make these high-quality relationships happen. The big studies find that programs that follow certain best practices just get better results. We're talking about things like ongoing training for mentors, not just a one-time thing. Having some structured activities so it's not always so awkward at first.
getting parents involved, and, this is a big one, making sure the mentors themselves have support and supervision.
All right, so let's tie this all together. When you put all this evidence on the table, what's the real bottom line here?
You know, if you take one thing away from all this research, it should be this. On average, mentorship programs for at-risk youth do work. They provide a real, measurable, and positive benefit. It's not always a massive effect, but it is a consistent and meaningful one.
And that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Mentorship isn't a magic bullet that solves everything. It's a tool. And just like any tool, how well it works depends entirely on how you use it. So knowing that success all comes down to the quality of the program and the strength of the relationship, the real question for all of us isn't if we should use this tool, but how do we get better and better at using it for the kids who need it the most?